Hi there, and welcome to Signature Leadership by Knowledge Hook. We are thrilled to have you here with the SEL Global Leadership Series. And we've got participants that are just jumping on right now. We would love you to take the time to jump into the chat and introduce yourself. We've got a great global audience today, and it's always fun seeing who is joining us. My name is Jennifer Adams. I'm the editor-in-chief with Knowledge Hook Signature Leadership. We've been doing these live roundtables for a couple of years now and still having a ton of fun with them. I'm going to introduce us to our partners. Our first partner is Signature Leadership by Knowledge Hook. Many of you have signed up and created a free account. Like I said, we've been doing this for a couple of years. There's great resources here if you're a teacher or a principal or a district leader or a ministry person. Lots of great resources, on-demand versions of live webinars that we've done before, as well as a really cool podcast series. Lots of really interesting speakers there. So feel free to jump on and take a look around and share the portal with your colleagues. That's our first partner. Our second partner is Karanga, which is a global organization, not for profit, that is the Global Alliance for Social Emotional Learning and Life Skills. And a number of us got together a couple of years ago and just decided there was great work happening in SEL, but there really wasn't a forum to create a global network. And so many of us here are connected to that global network and excited to be working with all of you. Our third partner is Salzburg Global Seminar, and they're a not-for-profit that came into existence just after the Second World War. And it was really an attempt to create an organization that would welcome current and future leaders really interested in shaping a better world. They do all sorts of retreats on different topics, whether it's finance, healthcare, education, and I've been privileged to attend a couple of them, and amazing. So those are our three partners, and we are very happy to be continuing on. Who's with us today? We've got a great crowd that has signed in and registered. And of course, we know that lots of the people are either working at this time in the day or they're at another part in the globe and they're hopefully sleeping. So people sign up so that they can get the on-demand version, which is sent out a couple of days later. We do have registrants from 5 Canadian provinces and territories, from 24 US states, and from 24 countries. So it's great to know that we have a global conversation and we can talk about these things together. It is my privilege to introduce you to a couple of incredible leaders. I had the opportunity, Gil invited a group of us to come to a conference on SEL that was being hosted in Israel. And what an incredible opportunity to see what it looks like when an entire country is looking at implementing SEL right across their country. Aaliyah was a keynote speaker. She is the CEO for CASEL. Many of you probably know that organization. It's a collaborative for academic, social, and emotional learning out of Chicago originally. And Aaliyah was the keynote speaker, and Gil was an incredible host and co-host, and thought that this would be a great opportunity to be able to talk about, how are we thinking about preparing the next generation, whether it's in the US or different parts in the world, and to really then move over to Gil and to get an example of what it looks like when an entire country is behind this concept of preparing the next generation and how that works together. So I am thrilled to welcome both of you, Aaliyah and Gil. A quick hello, and then we'll get into our presentation. Aaliyah, maybe a quick hello from you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to give a quick shout out to Mark Brackett, one of our board members who is on this call. I'm watching the chat, and so good to see people from truly all over the world and the US on this call. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thanks, Aaliyah. And over to you, Gil.
Hello, everybody. In Israel, it's almost evening. It's great to see people from Nepal, from Canada, from America. It's a great opportunity to be here with you.
That's fabulous. And we've got Justina as well. And Justina Schlend is with CASEL, and she was in Israel with us as well. And she'll be in the background a little bit adding some resources so that participants have some things to be going away with. So as I said, please jump in. We love interaction from the chat as a participant. Jump in there, ask questions, ask comments, and we'll do our best to kind of address them all. Aaliyah, we're really excited to hear you are a brand new CEO at CASEL, and just having spent some time with you, I can only imagine the direction that you're taking that organization, and you're such an amazing leader. And what the group probably doesn't know was that you were very connected to the Biden administration and helping out with the transition to the new government in place. So you've got an incredible background, and we look forward to hearing about all of those aspects. So Aaliyah, over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so my job today is first to stay on time. So I'm going to try to stay at 10 minutes or less, and to just kind of level set on some of the work that we're doing. But as a new CEO and new to the field of CASEL, well, new to many of you, I do want to just share a little bit about who I am and what brought me to this work. If we can go to the next slide, I want to first share that I have been in the field of education for over 20 years. I know I may look young, but I have been in the field quite a long time. I actually started off as a special education teacher and went on to become an assistant principal and principal. And I have made it a point to bring the true practitioner lens into everything that I do. I'm actually in my home office right now, and I have a drawer on the side of my desk where I keep notes and letters and cards that I have collected from kids across the years as a reminder to me of why we do the work that we do, to always keep kids first. And what you see here is one of the letters from when I was a principal that I have tucked away here in my file. The next photo that you see is actually a picture of my two sons who are 7 and 11. And they are a big part of what I do as well. I make it a point that they understand that the reason why I travel, the reason why I am an advocate for education is so that they can not only have a high quality education, but also to be able to make sure other kids across the world have the same opportunities that they do. This is actually a picture of them in Israel with me. Gil is an amazing host and an amazing cook as well. So he is not just an amazing education advocate, but he can cook as well. The kids had an extraordinary opportunity and actually had a chance to attend school in Israel, which they talk about to this day. And so I bring the parent lens to this work as well, which I think is really important, that we're always thinking about the parents who are trying to navigate the system. And then, as Jennifer mentioned, I was a presidential appointee. I was asked to join the administration at the beginning of the administration to really help think through how do we successfully reopen schools. And so I joined the administration in February before the secretary actually even came on board. And this picture that you see here is actually on my last day. That's our Secretary of Education. And he said to me, you know, Aaliyah, I hate to see you go, but if you're going to do anything, this is the work that you should be doing. And so social emotional learning is one of the president's priorities and the secretary's as well. And so we are still all very much in alignment. Moving on to the next slide, one of the things, as I was leaving my presidential post, I knew it was important to me to do work that was truly mission and vision based. And CASEL is known for coining the phrase social emotional learning almost 30 years ago. It is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that is really focused on the implementation, the communications, and the research, the policy, and the practice around social emotional learning. The framework of CASEL is not only known and recognized here in the United States, but truly all over the world, as evident as Gil will share with the work happening in Israel. Next slide. As we've seen with social emotional learning, there is a need for social emotional learning now more than ever. What we're seeing in our schools and our classroom is more than 45% of high schoolers here in the United States are still saying they are experiencing persistent feelings of sadness, of hopelessness, just in the last year. Over 20% of our kids this school year were marked chronically absent, which is actually higher than spring of 2021 during the pandemic. So we're seeing higher rates of absenteeism now than when kids were in virtual school. And when we talk about our teachers and our educators, over 91% of our teachers are saying that the stress level is at its all-time high. And we're seeing that at the rates of teachers leaving the field. And even with the most recent data, I was on a panel with a researcher from Harvard. For the first time in over 30 years, we're seeing the widening of the racial achievement gap. So all of these things combined is really signaling to us the need for social emotional learning to be at the core of education. Next slide, please. And when we think about our youth and what they're saying, they are truly telling us in every way, whether it's through mental health, whether it's through their absenteeism, that they really need time to focus on relationships, focus on themselves, to be reconnected with other young people, with the adults in that are in their lives, to be able to build a pathway forward. And this is just a really powerful quote from a 12th grade student. If we go to the next slide, we know that social emotional learning is truly critical to becoming future ready. And as we think about the changing of the world, as we think about technology, look at how technology right now is connecting all of us. The world is not getting any smaller, and we need to make sure that our young people are truly prepared for the future. We know that the jobs of even 2030, we don't know what 85% of those jobs will look like right now. And so we need to have our young people who feel confident, who have strong decision-making skills, who are entrepreneurial minded to be able to think through complex problems. And many of these skills that they need for the future are rooted in social emotional learning. And what we know, if we go to the next slide, social emotional learning is a global priority. Since I have come onto this role in January, the interest in social emotional learning and the outreach to CASEL has grown exponentially. Just recently, we had a webinar, and we had more than 500 of our 4,300 registrants from other countries. We had 81 countries outside of the United States on this webinar. There is a fundamental interest and recognition of the critical importance of social emotional learning now. And what's interesting with this growth in interest internationally, with the expansion and growth at the district and state level here in the United States, if we go to the next slide, there's this really interesting tale of two stories. At the district level, we see our superintendents and our teachers wanting to expand social emotional learning programs. We see parents more interested now and in support of social emotional learning than we ever have before, myself included. But then at the national level, and we look at the politics around social emotional learning, it has become part of the political war. And we are preparing for our midterm season here politically. And social emotional learning has become part of the conversation. And one of the things that we are doing is being very intentional and putting the right information out into the field. We are making sure that we are highlighting the research, the practice, the actual stories of what social emotional learning is like, so that we can really curb the misinformation and really set the stage for how we want social emotional learning to be discussed. So where do we go from here? Next slide. There are some things that we know, and things that I myself believe is critical to this moment. And I think from the field, we also know that is critical to this moment. And the first thing is, if we go to the next slide, is that the future of SEL is across the entire education continuum, from early childhood to K-12 to post-secondary into the workforce. There is not a component of of living and being where social emotional learning is not important. And we know that with the changes ahead, we need to be very clear on the developmental trajectory of SEL and the importance of it from early childhood into the workforce. I also think it's really important to highlight now more than ever, if we go to the next slide, the importance of cultural responsiveness. With the increased interest of SEL across the world, recognizing that all the while we are more alike than we are different, that there are cultural differences, and how do we honor those and approach them from an asset-based perspective. And also recognizing that it's not just about including students of color, but how are we thinking about kids with disabilities? How are we thinking about kids from rural areas or low income? I have a child with special healthcare needs. What does it mean for kids with special healthcare needs? So holistically, how are we thinking about kids of different backgrounds and needs? And then one of the things I think that this pandemic has really also elevated, which is the next slide, is the importance of school, family, and community partnerships. SEL cannot be done well without all three of those really working together and highlighting the importance of the three of those together, working in unison, you really bringing the expertise of the school, of the family, of the community to be able to bring that promise of life and of young people to fruition. And then my last slide are just some SEL resources that we have. And Justina put our framework in the chat as well, but there's a whole variety of resources that we have on our website for districts, for school-wide implementation, we just recently launched a blog where we're putting out more information. And so happy to continue to share as we go on this journey. With the not only expansion of SEL, but continuing to elevate the importance, not only in the US, but really across the world. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Aaliyah, and amazing. And to the participants in the chat, now you know why I was so thrilled to be able to get Aaliyah to be able to come and Justina with her, because CASEL, and many of you know the organization, but some of you may not. They have a plethora of resources, different ideas. And the one thing that I like about CASEL is that they're very respectful that SEL is going to look different in different contexts. And I know that one of the things that CASEL is talking about is kind of more of a global approach, and how do we, facilitate these conversations. And obviously SEL Global Leadership Series is an opportunity to do just that. Aaliyah, you mentioned something about, there's a million things that we can talk about, but just before I hand it over to Gil, the statistics that you were saying right at the beginning, that you were talking about the rate of absenteeism being actually higher than in 2021. And then slightly after that, you talked about the racial student achievement gaps growing. And, undoubtedly there is a link between those two pieces of data. And it made me think, there's been so much talk about recovery of learning, or learning recovery. And then, are people like Mark, like Jean Clinton, who's on the chat as well, talking about how we have to be really careful that this is not, jamming academics and not referring to the well-being. I almost think, so people kind of migrated from learning recovery to accelerated learning, making sure that we're only thinking about the real building blocks that are needed as far as academic learning, and trying not to go back and repeat 2 years of learning. But it brought me forward to this idea, but what about accelerated well-being? How do we make sure that we're really thinking about the well-being of our kids so that they can actually be coming in? And that's where we get to social emotional learning. So yeah, it really struck me. Aaliyah, anything that you're seeing kind of on that idea of, we've talked about accelerated learning, what about accelerated well-being?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, I was just on a webinar. I've been doing a lot of webinars and public speaking here lately. But I was actually just on one where in Colorado, which I think it's such a good example of the parent-family community partnership. of how they're using the Boys and Girls Club as a center and a hub to really address the well-being of the parents and of the kids, particularly over the summer and during out of school time, to be able, to your point, address the real need. And so the whole community said, wait a minute, this is a priority, and we recognize the need to be able to address the academics and the social emotional learning and well-being at the same time. But we can't only think about the kids, we need to think about the parents as well. And so they've developed this entire model where the Boys and Girls Clubs are the hub. And the Boys and Girls Club also had the academic learning center. So when school shut down, kids were going, that's where they were going when parents, parents who were essential workers had to go to work. And so this whole model, that's exactly what they're doing, of how do we make sure and how do we use this summer for high quality tutoring programs, for group counseling that's in a kid friendly environment, that where kids feel welcomed, where they can also, the parents, as they're picking up their kids, they can have evening sessions for parents as well. And I think more creative models like that are at the community and parent level, that's connecting the kid and the school and the home, is exactly what we need to be doing to be able to really address the needs. Because what we know is attendance is absolutely a proxy to relationship. If I'm not engaged and I don't feel like I have a relationship, it's easy for me to not attend. And so we have to start unpacking these pieces.
Fabulous, Aaliyah, and so much to go with there. We will continue that conversation, but I'm going to hand it over to my good friend and colleague, Gil. A perfect combination with Aaliyah, because of course, Aaliyah is talking about obviously what CASEL is doing and seeing around what's happening in the US. What Gil brings to the conversation today is two things. First of all, implementation. Gil is a practitioner and really trying to see what can this look like in his municipality and across the country. The other thing is it gives us a global piece, right? So we're seeing what it looks like in another country as they work their magic. So Gil, over to you. We look really forward to hearing what's happening in Israel.
Thank you very much. Let me just share the PowerPoint.
Absolutely.
Just a second. So first of all, thank you for having me. My favorite word in English is probably humble. And I feel there is new meanings to the word humble after listening to Aaliyah. Second of all, I think that I am on an impossible mission to try to describe Israel state implementation of SCL in 10 minutes. I feel a little bit like a passepartout in 80 days around the world, that I need to do a lot of stuff, to cover a lot of stuff in such a short time. So I'm being a little bit passepartout. I want to start with a picture that I like a lot. And this is Professor Mark Greenberg, a very important professor and part of CASEL management. And Mr. Cruz, the youngest son of Aaliyah. This is on the rooftop of the municipality of Tel Aviv, at the end of the Sderot Tel Aviv conference. You don't see in the picture the First Lady of Israel. She was attending this event, and it shows how SCL is important to policymakers in Israel. Just a second. This is a paper that I took from the Ministry of Education. We have in Israel many political wars regarding a lot of issues. SCL is not one of them. Not also SCL. Mathematics is not part of them as well. We have other political issues that we deal. There is a consensus, I think, among the policymakers in the Ministry of Education that SCL is very important and you have to implement it. Like Aaliyah was referring, I think parents are the backbone of everything that is needed to be done in implementing SCL. So partnership with parents is very important for the Ministry of Education. And then building students' resilience. This is one part of the implementation, then building educators' resilience and cell knowledge, then building systematic approach to improve schools' climate, and then forming systematic approach, KPIs and implementation strategy. This is what the Ministry of Education is doing, and doing it very with a lot of putting a lot of money and a lot of emphasis on this across the country. I'm going to get into Sderot. Sderot is my city. I'm the head of education in Sderot. It's a city of about 40,000 citizens. And I'm going to describe our 2 years of implementation of SCL in Sderot. Why SCL? I can find 2 reasons why we chose SCL. One, because we want to improve the well-being of kids. Sderot is about 1 kilometer away from the border with Gaza Strip. During the last 20 years, there were thousands of rockets that landed in Sderot. In every house, every home in Sderot, you can find a grown-up or child with post-traumatic. Having said that, well-being is not something that you can choose not to address, and so SCL is I think one of the best ways to address and to deal with well-being of kids and adults alike. But there is another reason why doing SCL. In Israel, I'm not sure, not only in Israel, but in Israel, if you want to have social mobility, choose to live in the center of Israel. The further you go away from the center of Israel to the peripheral cities, the less chances you have to have social mobility. The less chances you have to break the glass ceiling. So in order to break the glass ceiling of a very peripheral city in the southern part of Israel, we chose SCL in order to improve social mobility of the kids. What we did is we took 100 educators. And when I say educators, I mean, we came from the notion that it takes a village to raise a child. So we took teachers and kindergarten teachers and kindergarten assistants and first to 3 years old experts and people that work in this field and social workers and many, many parents and psychologists and municipality administrators and informal education and youth at risk specialists. And we mixed everybody in rooms of 25, and we did training of around 100 hours of training for each group. Now, I think this is very unique in Israel. I'm not sure how much you can see it around the world, that you mixed everybody in the same room and they learn together. So it was very important for us to have a very diverse group of educators in a very wide sense, and I include parents as educators as well. So they were part of the group. After training them with, you can see around 10 SCL experts organizations that took part in this orientation and training, we turned each one of those 100 educators into R&D. It means that they need to do 2 cycles of 10 weeks of implementation. They need to choose one skill. It doesn't have to be a very complicated skill, but one SCL skill. And then they have to choose a group of children or grown-ups to work with. They can choose, it depends, and it's the groups are very different from each other. I'm talking about 100 groups. And then they need to implement the skill for 10 weeks. We believe that when they start, they must understand that it's not going to be perfect. So after 10 weeks, they stop, they study, they assess, they replan, and they do another session of 10 weeks of implementation with the same kids in order to improve and do it better. Then they take all the stuff that they learned during those 20 weeks of implementation, they bring it to us, and we try to take the island into a continent, to transfer all the knowledge that they gathered together. There is no notebook or handbook how to do it. We teach them about SCL very thoroughly. We take them to Portugal, by the way, to learn about SCL, but then they have to invent themselves and to make themselves into their own point of view about how to implement SCL with the kids or with the grown-ups they work with. We focus in Sderot with 4 clusters of skills. One cluster has to do with consistency. It's like the engine. We have problem with the engine. The engines in Sderot, in the peripheral area, is not working too good. They don't get to the distance they should come or to the height they should climb. So we try to give them skills to improve their engine. So we work on agency and self-efficacy and resilience and growth mindset. This is all has to do with consistency and with the engine. But engine is not enough. We need to improve the steering wheel. They need to improve their decision-making. They need to understand where to go, how to plan, what decision to make, what decision not to neglect, etc. So this is about reality, the engine and the steering wheel. But there is another Excel and X, and there is the empathy cluster and the self-regulation cluster. This has to do with relationship. Every relationship between, let's say, a husband and a wife has to do with empathy and self-regulation. You need to be empathetic about some stuff, and you need to regulate yourself, usually, if you're married, if you want to keep those marriage alive. And I think in life, not only in marriage, you need to work on those 4 clusters in order to make sure that you have the skills to break the glass ceiling. So this is Sderot in a nutshell. And I'm moving to another city. This is the biggest city in Israel. This is Tel Aviv, Yafo. And they have a different approach to implementing the CASEL. And this is very important to see that different municipalities, different point of views and philosophies about how to implement CASEL in the cities. They started to work 1 year ago, and they thought about the CASEL circle, and they decided to focus on 13 skills, mega skills or important skills that I think that in Tel Aviv, they are the most important skills for children living in Tel Aviv. So you can see 6 and 4 and 3. Then they wanted to do something which is, I think it's very unique around the world. They decided to split it into a group age of 3 years, Pilster 3, 3, 6, 6, 9, 9, 12, 12, 15, and 18, 15, 18. And for each critical SCL skill, the 13 of those, each think tank, which is composed of people that are doing or practicing or experts in the group age. For instance, if it's the group age of 6 to 9, so school principals and teachers, elementary school teachers, and SCL experts and parents and kids sometimes, they ask themselves for each critical cell skill, for each group age, 2 questions. 1, what are the indicators or the indications and evidence for the best practice implementation? What are we expected to see and observe? How do we know that it's working? This is number 1. Number 2, what action and practical pedagogy is needed in order to obtain the desired impact? So they wrote a book for each group age, for each one of the 13 cell skills, in order to help the people that work with the group age to implement CASEL in stuff that was written bottom up with CASEL experts in Tel Aviv and with the Minister of Education. So this is the approach of Tel Aviv. I want to show for my last 2 NGOs, 2 initiatives in Israel. One is a CASEL challenge. This is a competition that was held by 8200. This is a intelligence unit in the army. The people that left the unit did this, and they ran a competition over 1 million new shekels, which is not it's quite a lot, for the startup that can implement something that has to do with SCL and personalization of learning. So the competition is still on. And this is the committee that escort this competition. You can see our friend, Professor Kimberly Shornet-Weikel, and people from Tel Aviv University. So it's very well done, I think, over there. And the last thing I want to show is another initiative. It's a combination between Maoz, which is a leadership organization NGO, with the Rothschild foundation. It's a very famous foundation, I think, and the Minister of Education. We're talking about a 5 years program. We are talking about 10 municipalities. We are talking about 15 cell experts that help those 10 municipalities. And we're talking about a lot of money. This is in dollars. $25 million investment in implementation of cell at municipalities with diverse population. We're talking about municipalities of ultra-Orthodox, Arabs, Jews, and this is a very interesting initiative that starts now. So this is more or less my presentation about what is on 10 minutes.
Gil, an amazing job. And I have no doubt that the audience is very aware of why we asked you to join us. It is such an opportunity to see a country that's moving in this direction and how you've done it. And Aaliyah, I don't know if you want to make a comment on it, but you know, we had an opportunity to actually see all those levels of government interacting and the support. And, you know, even in the slides that you showed, Gil, you showed how the ministry has put that right into their policy framework. And so it's there's a national ministry that's saying this is important in all of our schools, and yet they've left it to the municipalities to make it their own. And I think it's that perfect combination of centralization and decentralization. The centralization is necessary to make the claim that this is going to be important. And then the decentralization to make it their own, and that commitment to do it right for the communities that they're living in. Great examples. Aaliyah, any comment on that?
Yeah, well, I was watching the chat as well. And, you know, I think one of the things, and as a policy person over the last, I don't know, decade plus, one of the things that to me was striking about Israel is that the policy conditions and the support is there for them to be able to do the work. It was very powerful to see even the mayors of both Tel Aviv, Jaffa, and Sderot together at the conference talking about why this is a priority. And you have two very different municipalities talking about the importance in their approach. And so I think having not only the political support, but the political will to do it is certainly what makes Israel very unique. And I had a chance with Gil to sit down and talk to the First Lady and really hear from her interest about social emotional learning and why was it so important, and the role that it would play, not only and not just as approach to trauma or as a COVID response, but holistically to the unique complexities of Israel. And so there was just so many layers of true interest across the government and types of government that I think is really extraordinary.
Gil, the other thing, you know, you talked about the groups that you put together, and that there was, you know, the different stakeholders, the different employees within the education system, the family members, et cetera, the people that were informal education and formal education. That was another thing that really came out, is that everybody has a role to play. And the only way that this will be successful is if there are those family and business and political partnerships that everyone says that this is important and they can have a role. Really quite extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
There is a question that I want to address, whether it's a matter of culture. I have no idea if it's a matter of culture, but there is something that I understood when I met Pedro in Portugal 2 weeks ago. He took me surfing, and I hate the ocean. I was living next to the ocean for 6 years. I spent 4 times on the beach during those 6 years, and I lived, I think, less than 100 meters away from the waves. So he took me surfing with organization, SCL organization, amazing one. It's called Wave by Wave in Portugal. And in the sea, I understood something which is very important regarding implementation. When you don't move, it's very hard to stay stable on the boards. When you start moving, it's getting much easier to control the board. And I think this has to do with implementation as well. And I think it's regardless of any culture. When you start, if you plan for many, many years and you try to make the infrastructure, everything you need to be on the right spot, it will be very hard to start. You need to start to gain some velocity, and then you feel on more stable ground.
That's such a good analogy. Jennifer, can I just build, not on
Absolutely.
that, but we recently had a board meeting, and I want to coin Mark Brackett. He mentioned that we really have to, at the core of this, because somebody put here that their government, the adults really turn a blind eye to if the approaches don't fit their agenda. And we have to move away from the adults and be centered on the kids and what they need. And what we're seeing and hearing from our kids is that they are struggling right now. Our young people are they are dealing with more than they have ever. And I was also on another webinar. They were talking about how which we said it earlier, that it takes a village to raise a child. And right now, every level of the village is stressed. Educators are stressed. We talked about, there was a comment about educator well-being. We have kids are stressed and struggling. We have parents who are stressed. We then have communities that are stressed. We have educators that are stressed. So everybody the village that took care of kids are stressed. And we need to really think about shifting the dialogue about what adults think and what their opinions are, to then what is it that kids need, and what are the strategies and the interventions that are evidence-based and research-based to help support them. And so I think we do just need to start shifting the conversation and putting kids first.
And the great news, Aaliyah, is that it doesn't even have to be an either or anymore. I agree 100%. That's exactly where we start. But I've been in a lot of conversations through my work with this thought leadership series with business leaders. And business leaders are saying, and no surprise to either of you, that they're seeing the exact same thing in their employees. They're stressed. They had kids at home. They were trying to work from home. Some of them are continuing to work from home. They're worried about their kids. They're worried about what's going on in the world right now, which is certainly understandable. And so they're saying that when they're looking at recruiting, they're not looking at recruiting just from technical skills and percentage grades that kids are coming in. They're looking for social emotional skills, because they know that those are the adults that they'll be able to work with when they're getting in. They talk about performance evaluations. They're even looking at that from performance evaluation, but more importantly, from a talent development, and that they're investing in helping their employees develop the social emotional skills that will help them to thrive at home and in the workplace. So, the good news is I think that we've got some, and you talked about that idea from early childhood right into the workforce. We've got all of those groups now that can help us really get this word out. Gil, over to you.
Yeah, I want to address another thing about Pedro. Pedro, when I said, first of all, we have Kim in the audience. Kimberly Shonet-Reichel is with us now, and I'm a big fan of Kim. So I'm very moved and happy to see you here with us. Pedro Cunha is part of the Gulbenkian Foundation in Portugal, and it took us to meet somebody who is doing opera at jail. Opera in jail is a project that is done for the last 40 years, I think, and it's making people, inmates, do opera and perform, first of all, Mozart, and then they perform their own opera. And this was amazing for me because there is always the discussion, who do you deal with? Do you deal with the kids or with the grown-ups? And there is a discussion there. And he said to us that 60 or 70% of the time, he deals with people outside of the jail, with the families, with the people that are in charge of the prison, with the prison principals, and not with the inmates. And I think this is very important for me. I think somebody asked, how do we deal with people with trauma, with educators with trauma? And I think that you need to deal with them. You need to start working with adults and to make sure that there is no misleading when you talk about SCL, but yourself you're not behaving in SCL way. So I think 60-70% of the time dealing with adults it's a good invest.
Gil, I can't agree with you more. And when we started talking, when I was director of education or superintendent in the school district in Ottawa, we launched kind of looking into well-being and looking into social emotional skills. And we did a big community survey to see what were the skills, very similar to what Shirley did in Tel Aviv. You know, what were the skills that they believe were important, the characteristics and skills. And it was really interesting, the reaction in the school district. The teachers and the principals very quickly said exactly what Judith in the chat is saying. What about us? You know, we need to have opportunities to develop those skills as well. And that was a great comeback, because it wasn't just about the kids, it was about all of us. It put us all in a learning stance together. And it acknowledged that, you know, we need to be helping our adults develop, all of us. So, you know, agree 100%, that ability to be thinking about what about the people around, whether it's parents, whether it's education, whether it's informal education leaders, how do we make sure that we're investing in them as well? Aaliyah, jump in.
Yeah, and Justina, maybe we'll put it in the chat. We'll part of CASEL's 10 indicators for systemic SEL talks about building the adult capacities. And, you know, it is important for adults to also practice and showcase those skills for themselves, but then also for kids as well. And so that is part of a systemic approach. And so I just want to highlight that it's not only important to think about holistically the adults and their capabilities and capacities, but then also recognizing that SEL and SEL approaches, it doesn't just happen in the classroom in the school. We have to think about all of the different environments, including the community and other places where SEL also happens. Oh, thank you, Justina, as well.
Yeah, and Aaliyah, just on that, Gil, you had showed a picture of Mark Greenberg, who is, for those of you who don't know him, he's a board member of CASEL and has done incredible work over the number of decades, particularly on SEL and adults. And caring for educators, caring for adults, a real theme around that. And actually, he's doing a podcast with me next week. So if you jump on the platform, you'll see it posted probably in the next couple of weeks. And he's going to be talking specifically on that and the work that he's been doing and the research that he's been doing. So lots of work in those areas. Aaliyah, I'm going to go back to really the very foundation of CASEL. And, you know, when one of the things that, you know, over the last number of years, we get pushback is that, you know, the intent is people that are talking about SEL are only interested in the social emotional learning. And what's really interesting is you look at the name of CASEL, it's the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Skills. It's not an either or. And, you know, that's, I think, is something important, that we know that the research very clearly says that there is an interrelationship between building social emotional skills that helps build academic skills. Building academic skills will help build social emotional skills. Anything that you've seen on that? And Gil, I'm going to ask the same question. You're on the ground implementing this. You've been doing it for a couple of years. What are you seeing in your community about the relationship between those two pieces? Aaliyah, over to you.
Yeah, I actually find myself talking about this a lot in my media interviews, because here in the US, there's been such a push for accelerated academic instruction, which you were talking about earlier. And this, you know, this piece of, well, you know, we're a year post-pandemic and kids aren't making the academic gains that we thought they would. Like, we need to, what should we be doing? And there have been a lot of discussions of, you know, we should separate them and just focus on academics. And so really, it's been elevating the research and the evidence to really showcase that you don't want to bifurcate the academics and social emotional learning, that the importance is to really integrate the two, and that you can do the two very well. And so I have actually found that elevating that more than ever, particularly as there is such a push to try to understand where kids are academically, has really been a big part of what I have found myself having to do, particularly with policymakers who want to see results, that I've had to spend a lot of time doing that.
Yeah, I know Jean Clinton is on with us, and she's an incredible child psychiatrist from Canada, from just outside of Toronto area, and she's done a ton of work with a lot of us and a lot of our school districts about making sure that we get that balance. It's got to be the well-being the first, the engagement, helping kids get reintegrated back into schools. Some of them, you know, it's been so long, if they're really little, they don't even know those routines. Having them have an opportunity to build relationships, and then let's think of where they are with their academic learning, and really just focus on those key building blocks, as opposed to going back and trying to, you know, gather up everything that would have taken place over those couple of years. Gil, what are you seeing as far as that relationship, as you've been focusing in on social emotional learning? How is that helping the academic learning piece? What are you seeing on the ground?
First of all, when I started, my internet is a little bit problematic. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we do, Gil. We're good.
Okay, sorry. When I saw the research Kim is doing, did many years ago, taking blood from kids and trying to check all kind of stuff very empirically with RCT research, I want to talk a little bit what we don't do enough, our failures. I think this is very important. When you talk about CASEL, you need to talk about things that you don't achieve. I think we are not good enough in Israel doing the RCT research. I think we lack the experience, and we are not moved money on that. Why to put money on RCTs and not put money on more programs? And I think that I'm sure that SCL improves grades, and not only the social and emotional status of people, but I think we need to improve our RCT with the help of Kimberly and other people. And I think this is the next stage that we need to try to achieve.
Thanks, Gil. And there is amazing research out there. I mean, you know, many of you know of the OECD study on social emotional skills, survey on social emotional skills. That was kind of the first international study. But before we even got to that, we did a massive literature review as far as, you know, the connection between non-cognitive and cognitive skills. And there was clear evidence there. I know that CASEL has a research center where they, you know, post the different pieces of research. And I think practically we're seeing that all the time. For those, Gil just mentioned Kim Schonert-Reichel, one of our team that was in Israel together. And she is an amazing researcher. We're calling her Canadian because she was in British Columbia for 20 years and doing research there. So she's not allowed to not be Canadian, but she is back in the US at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And there's an on-demand version on the portal just from a month ago, I think, that was about, it was with Peter Senge and with Kim. And Kim walked through the approach that they did in British Columbia with looking at measuring skills, competencies for with an early development instrument, a middle school's development instrument, and really showed how leading with that kind of information and having that information being available to every school district across the province, that it turned out to be that every school district, when you go in and talk about social emotional learning, it's not a foreign concept. They know what it is, they can describe it. And that they noticed at the same time, when they looked at student achievement over that period where the implementation of SEL was really taking place, that there was an improvement across big, broad categories, especially with kids that historically have not, groups of kids that have historically not performed on an achievement standard as well. So, you know, we've got lots of evidence now, and I think we just have to keep pushing at it. And again, I said that the business leaders, they're talking about how important it is as well. Aaliyah, any reflections on that?
I was just earlier, there was a Forbes, I'll connect it, I promise. There was a Forbes, quote that came out about how in the workplace they are starting to really focus on the well-being of their employers. And this is Forbes. And I think the more that workforce and employers, which it goes back into business leaders and some of the workforce work that CASEL has been also leading the way, our policy team has been leading the way on really elevating the workforce connection and underscoring that these are life skills. These are, like that's what we're trying to underscore. And so we're seeing it all across. And I actually sent it to the comms team today and I said, wow, what if we can get Forbes to point to CASEL and what we're trying to do? Because that's exactly what they were talking about, is social emotional skills in the workplace. And this, again, this is Forbes that is recognized across the world. And so business leaders really do have such an opportunity to support what we're trying to do. We're all really saying the same thing, but in some using different words.
I did a live roundtable with 3 either CEOs or senior VPs of HR from 3 big, commercial enterprises. And they were talking about exactly those things. When you go back to the beginning of our conversation together, we talked about those partnerships, right? If the employees are experiencing opportunities for development in those particular social emotional skills, and they're going home and they're seeing that their kids are learning and developing those kids at school and in extracurricular activities, it really starts to close the circle. And parents, it's another way of connecting education, the child's education to them. We always knew that there was a ton of research that showed where a parent feels connected to their child's learning, it has a huge impact on the child's learning. And if we can think of it not just academic learning, but social emotional learning, what a great way of closing that circle.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also parents cannot focus at work when they're concerned about their child's learning or their child's health or safety. And it impacts their ability to perform in the workplace. I think about myself as a parent. Whenever I'm worried about what's going on at home or my kids, I can't focus at work. And it's that emotional connection. It's what we're talking about. And it's the same thing for our kids. And so it's creating those same connective bonds and making it real, because our kids are going through what we as adults are also going through.
Absolutely.
And if I can jump in.
Yeah, Gil, over to you.
Just if you remember the picture from the rooftop, there was something that happened over there that really influenced me. And it was just a couple of minutes before, the 2 children of Aaliyah, Cruz and Chaz, they went to the DJ, a lady, and they started to ask questions. And in no time, they got over the DJ equipment, and they did the music for us. And for me, seeing children in a very foreign country with the first lady in the background doing that, this is a lot of agency, and there's a lot of cell skills implemented in them. And I wanted my children and our children in Israel be like that. It was very powerful, Aaliyah, and you should be very proud as a mother.
What a fabulous, happy way to end this. I have to admit, I just glanced at the time. I had no idea that the hour was already up, and it is. And on behalf of the people in the audience, Gil and Aaliyah and Justina, thank you so much for joining us here. We're going to continue this conversation, and I'm going to be knocking on your doors to do a podcast so that I can do something. What we've heard back from the audience is they love to have something where they can just plug in and go for a walk, or plug in and go for a little run. So I'm going to be knocking on your doors and kind of continuing on with this conversation, if you're okay with that. Just a quick sharing with the group here. In addition to this thought leadership series, Knowledge Hook also has a thought leadership series for math leaders. The company is a digital math company, and you are welcome to share this link with any of your district leaders in mathematics or their teachers. It's the exact same concept of this. Amazing speakers that are experts in mathematics, math consultants, academics that are trying to help us see how we can improve kids' connection to mathematics. So that's one possibility. Second one that we're doing is a new approach, and this is something, it's a little intimate setting, and it's called Leaders Day. And we take about 15 or 20 leaders that sign up for, right now we're doing the topic of essential metrics for system improvement. And we invite district leaders to come in and have a 90-minute session where we talk about that with a couple of experts, but mostly facilitating a conversation about from superintendents, assistant superintendents right across North America. And we're happy to open it up to others as well. So if you're interested, jump in with that. And finally, I mentioned podcast, just did a really good podcast with Yang Zhao. I'm not sure how many of you know him, but he is such an interesting writer. And feel free to jump in. The podcasts are available on any of your regular platforms. And of course, all of this is free of charge. So just want to keep the conversation going. Lots of great learning. And this is going to be our last live roundtable for this year. As Aaliyah mentioned, her kids are finished school in a couple of days, and we know that a lot of the others are doing that as well. But we'll be back at the end of August, and we'll continue with our signature leadership series. So thank you so much, Aaliyah and Gil and Justina, and to all the participants. We look forward to seeing you in the fall.
Take care.
Take care,
Thank you,
everyone.
Jennifer.